At 12:54 in the morning on June 14, 2017, an electrical fault inside a fridge freezer started a fire in Flat 16 of Grenfell Tower, a 24-story residential block in North Kensington, London. Within 30 minutes, the fire had climbed the outside of the building. By 4:30 in the morning, it had spread across all four sides. 72 people died. It is the deadliest structural fire in the United Kingdom since the Piper Alpha disaster of 1988. Residents had been warning in writing for years that a fire like this was coming. The cladding installed on the building 3 years earlier had failed fire safety tests before it went up, and the company that made it knew. Nobody has ever been criminally charged. Grenfell Tower was built in 1974, a 24-story council tower block in North Kensington, one of the wealthiest boroughs in London. It housed around 350 people across 129 flats, most of them tenants of the local council, many of them immigrant families, key workers, and people on lower incomes living a few streets from some of the most expensive real estate in Britain. In 2012, the council and its tenant management organization began planning a refurbishment of the tower. New windows, new heating, and a new exterior. The work would also change how the tower looked from the street, wrapping the aging concrete in a modern cladding system. The refurbishment was finished in 2016. It cost roughly £10 million. The cladding chosen for Grenfell Tower was an aluminium composite panel with a polyethylene core, essentially a sandwich of two thin metal sheets around a layer of solid plastic. A safer version of the same panel existed, with a fire-resistant mineral core instead of plastic. The price difference between the two options was approximately £2 per square meter. Choosing the cheaper, flammable version saved the project around £293,000. Roughly, the cost of a single flat in the borough where Grenfell Tower stood. The panels had already failed fire safety tests when burned in earlier trials, years before they were fitted to Grenfell. The company that made them, Arconic, knew this. Internal company documents later obtained by the inquiry showed staff discussing the test failures and the danger of using the product on tall buildings, and continuing to sell it anyway, without disclosing the failed results. Architects, contractors, or the building owners who were specifying it. The insulation behind the panels, made by a separate manufacturer, had also been tested and found to fail, and was marketed as safe, regardless. Two separate companies, selling two separate products, both knowing both products would burn the way they ultimately did. Edward Defarn lived on the 16th floor of Grenfell Tower. For years, he and a small group of residents had written a blog called the Grenfell Action Group, documenting safety failures in the building, broken fire doors, exposed gas pipes, electrical faults, and growing concern about the new cladding being fitted around them while they were still living inside. Defarn had repeatedly requested copies of the meeting minutes from the refurbishment project, hoping to understand exactly what materials were being chosen and why. He was refused. The tenant management organization told him the information was not something residents were entitled to see. In November 2016, 7 months before the fire, Defarn published a post that read in part that only a catastrophic event exposing the housing management organization's ineptitude would bring an end to the dangerous conditions residents were living in. He wrote that he believed only a serious fire, with serious loss of life, would finally make anyone listen to what they had been saying for years. 7 months later, he was inside the building when it happened. He survived. The blog post became evidence at the inquiry that followed. The council and the tenant management organization had received numerous fire safety complaints in the years before 2017 about a single staircase serving the entire building, about fire doors that didn't close properly, about a 2013 electrical fault that caused power surges through residents' flats and very nearly started a fire of its own. A fire at a tower block in Shepherd's Bush in 2016 had spread rapidly up flammable cladding, and the London Fire Brigade wrote to every council in London afterward, warning them to review their own buildings. There is no record that Grenfell's cladding was reviewed as a result. None of the warnings, not the residents, not the fire brigades, led to the cladding being inspected or removed. The fire began just before 1 in the morning. A faulty wiring connection inside a hotpoint fridge freezer in flat 16 overheated and ignited the plastic casing around it. The resident, Bahailu Kabedi, was woken by a smoke alarm. He saw flames near the fridge, called the fire brigade, and warned his neighbors. It was, by every account, an ordinary and survivable kitchen fire. The kind of fire crews deal with safely many times a week. The first fire engine arrived within 6 minutes. Firefighters entered the flat and began putting out the blaze. For the first 15 minutes, everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. Then the fire found the cladding. Flames escaping through the kitchen window reached the exterior panels on the outside of the building at around 1:09 in the morning. The polyethylene core ignited almost immediately. Within minutes, fire was climbing the outside wall of the tower, floor by floor, far faster than it had spread inside the flat. By 1:26, roughly 20 minutes after the cladding caught, the fire had reached the roof, 20 floors above where it started. It then began spreading downward and sideways across all 4 faces of the building, entering flats through windows that the exterior fire had already broken. The building's entire exterior had become, in effect, a continuous vertical chimney of burning plastic. Grenfell Tower operated under a fire safety policy called Stay Put, the standard approach for purpose-built blocks of flats in the UK, based on the assumption that each flat is a sealed fire compartment that can contain a fire for at least an hour while it burns out or is extinguished. Residents are trained to remain in their homes during a fire rather than evacuate, because the building itself is supposed to be the safety measure. The cladding fire broke that assumption completely. Flats that had never been touched by the original kitchen fire were catching a light from the outside, independently of each other, all over the building, at the same time. Emergency call handlers continued advising residents to stay in their flats until 2:47 in the morning. Nearly 2 hours after the fire began, and more than an hour after it was visibly out of control on the building's exterior. The inquiry later found that this advice should have been reversed by 1:30, once it was clear the fire had broken out of its compartment. Many residents who followed the stay-put advice exactly as instructed were trapped in flats that filled with smoke long before any rescue reached them. Some who ignored the advice and made their own way down the single staircase survived. Others who tried to leave later, once the smoke had filled the stairwell, did not. London Fire Brigade firefighters made repeated, dangerous ascents into the burning tower, often without functioning radios. The building structure was blocking their signal, and with limited information about where people were trapped or which floors were survivable. They are credited with rescuing 65 people directly from the building, often carrying children and the elderly down more than 15 floors through smoke-filled stairwells, sometimes making the same ascent and descent multiple times. Over 100 more residents escaped on their own, many of them disobeying the official stay-put advice to do so, judging correctly that their own building was no longer the place the policy assumed it to be. The inquiry would later find that senior fire brigade leadership had not properly prepared frontline crews for a fire of this kind, that there was no effective policy for evacuating a high-rise building whose external walls were on fire, and that knowledge of the specific danger posed by combustible cladding, known to the brigade's own command structure in general terms, had never been translated into training or operational guidance that reached the firefighters on the ground that night. Mariam Elgvari was 27 years old. She lived on the 19th floor with her mother, Esla. They spoke to each other by phone as the fire closed in, and to a fire control operator, who continued to advise them to stay where they were, exactly as the policy instructed. Mariam and her mother died together in their flat, following the guidance they had been given to the end. Logan Gomes was stillborn in hospital in the hours after the fire. His mother, Andrea, had inhaled smoke and was placed in an induced coma while pregnant, and she was not told her son had died until 4 days later, when she finally woke up. Mohammed al-Hajjali was 23 years old. He had fled the Syrian civil war for the UK 3 years earlier in search of somewhere safe to live. He died on the 14th floor of a London tower block that had been wrapped in flammable plastic to save the project money. Khadija Sayeh was 24, a photographer whose work had just been selected for the Venice Biennale, one of the most prestigious art exhibitions in the world. She died in the fire alongside her mother, Mary Mendy, in their flat on the 20th floor. Her photographs were shown in Venice that summer regardless, while her family buried her. The Dean family, Zainab, 32, and her 2-year-old son Jeremiah, also died together. Gloria Trevisan and Marco Gottardi, an Italian couple in their 20s, were on the phone to their families in Italy as the smoke filled their flat, describing what was happening to them in real time until the calls stopped. By the time the fire was brought under control, 72 people were dead, including 2 who died later in hospital. Over 70 more were injured. 223 people escaped the building. It took firefighters until the following afternoon to fully extinguish the blaze. Many of the dead were never identified by sight. DNA testing was the only way some families learned what had happened to the people they loved. For weeks afterward, the tower stood blackened against the London skyline, visible for miles, while families searched for relatives who were still listed as missing. Theresa May, then Prime Minister, ordered a full public inquiry within days. The Grenfell Tower inquiry began formally in September 2017, chaired by retired Judge Sir Martin Moore-Bick. Its first phase, examining the night of the fire itself, was published in October 2019. It found systemic failures in the London Fire Brigade's response and confirmed that the cladding was the primary cause of the fire's catastrophic spread. The inquiry's second and final phase examined how the cladding came to be on the building in the first place, the decisions, the cost-cutting, and the companies involved. That report was not published until September 2024, 7 years after the fire. The final report ran to almost 1,700 pages. It found, in the words of the inquiry itself, that the fire was the culmination of decades of failure by central government, local government, and the construction industry, stretching back long before the 2016 refurbishment began. It found that the companies that manufactured and sold the cladding and its insulation had engaged in what the inquiry called systematic dishonesty, manipulating fire test results, marketing combustible products as safe when their own internal data showed otherwise, and concealing information from architects, building control officers, and the construction industry generally that would have prevented their use on buildings like Grenfell. The architect, Studio E, the main contractor, Ryden, the cladding subcontractor, and the fire safety inspection firm involved in the refurbishment were all found to bear significant responsibility for the specific decisions that put combustible material on that building. The council and its tenant management organization were found to have cared more about controlling costs and managing residents' complaints than about the basic safety of the people inside the tower. Despite the scale and clarity of the inquiry's findings, no individual or company has been criminally charged in connection with the 72 deaths, as of the report's publication in 2024. The Metropolitan Police opened a criminal investigation in 2017, examining potential charges including manslaughter, corporate manslaughter, fraud, and breaches of fire safety and building regulations. That investigation was, by design, paused for long stretches until the public inquiry concluded, first in 2019, then again until the final report in 2024, specifically so that the inquiry's own fact-finding would not be compromised by a parallel criminal process. Police have stated they now intend to pursue charges against multiple individuals and organizations, and have indicated the investigation involves an unusually large volume of material spanning a refurbishment, several companies, and 2 layers of government. They have also cautioned that any prosecution could still take years to reach a courtroom, by which point more than a decade will have passed since 72 people died in their own homes. The companies named most prominently in the final report continued operating in the years between the fire and the report's publication. Arconic, the manufacturer of the cladding panels, continued to sell building products internationally throughout the 7-year inquiry. Studio E, the architectural firm responsible for the refurbishment, ceased trading in 2019, not as a consequence of any finding against it, but as part of an unrelated business decision made years before the final report existed. No fines have been issued against any of the companies named. No licenses have been revoked. No director has faced any regulatory sanction. The families of the 72 people who died have spent more than 7 years waiting for a single criminal trial date, while every company found responsible for selling them. In effect, a fire as a finished building product has continued, in some form, to do business. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea is one of the wealthiest local authorities in the United Kingdom, with some of the highest property values in the country inside its boundaries. Grenfell Tower stood in the same borough as multi-million-pound townhouses, separated from them by little more than a few streets. The inquiry found that the council's tenant management organization had developed what it described as a toxic atmosphere in its relationship with residents, one in which complaints, including repeated complaints about fire safety, were treated as a nuisance to be managed rather than evidence to be acted on. Residents who raised concerns, including Daffern and the Grenfell Action Group, were at times threatened with legal action by the council for what officials called defamatory accusations. The council's own correspondence, examined by the inquiry, showed officials more focused on the reputational risk of residents' complaints than on the substance of what those complaints were actually warning about. After the fire, the UK government discovered that Grenfell's cladding was not unique. Hundreds of other residential tower blocks across Britain had been fitted with the same or similar combustible aluminium composite panels, often during similar cost-driven refurbishments carried out by other councils and housing associations. Many of those buildings housed thousands of residents who, in the months after Grenfell, learned for the first time that they too were living inside flammable cladding, sometimes discovering this from news reports rather than from their own landlords. The resulting remediation crisis, now widely referred to in the UK as the building safety crisis, left leaseholders in some buildings facing repair bills running into tens of thousands of pounds each for cladding that government policy and industry practice, not the leaseholders themselves, had chosen to install. Some residents took years to have their buildings made safe. Some are still waiting now. Here is what this case is about. A fridge caught fire in a way fridges occasionally do, and for 15 minutes, the response to it was exactly what it should have been. Then the fire reached cladding that had failed fire tests before it was ever installed, made by a company that knew it had failed and sold it anyway, chosen by a council that saved under £300,000 by picking the version that would burn. Residents had warned in writing for years that this was coming. A blog post 7 months before the fire predicted that only a catastrophic loss of life would expose what was happening inside that building. It took 72 deaths to confirm he was right. 7 years later, nobody has been charged with anything.